Hi, and welcome back to Rick's Room. This is the show where we pretend we're at the end of a busy show, at the end of a day, and we're in the hotel lobby or bar, and we finally see the person we've wanted to talk to all day coming up to us. As many of you know, one of my favorite people to talk to is Mike Harris. Mike, thanks for being with me.
My pleasure as always, Rick. Appreciate it.
Now, last week when we talked, you said you had an idea for bringing somebody on that you wanted to talk about or to. So tell us about that.
Absolutely. So I brought in a little bench strength, a good friend of mine and somebody I've worked with in the past, known for a long time, very knowledgeable, Barry Owens, and I'm really excited to have him on.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Barry, it's really good to have you here. We've talked about having you on before. You and I have had so many conversations about the world, everything, industry, housing, all the stuff that's near and dear to us. So I thought maybe, it'd be great to have you on, and let's just talk. So to start with, I know you're new to Black Dome. You want to talk a little bit about that? Kind of tell us where you're going with that?
Yeah. So I started up my own company just about 5 years ago, and recently parted ways with that activity and was out in the market, was talking to a lot of people, and I knew the guys over at Black Dome for a long time. They'd been, Vic Draper and his team I'd been friends with for literally decades, back to my servicing days in the late 90s, mid 90s. So after talking with them for a while, it really became evident that there was a really good fit in strategy and what our goals were and what our thought processes were. So I joined Black Dome just about a month and a half ago now. And Black Dome, as a general concept, their core is in the property preservation space on a national level. And they also have a disposition asset management group, as well as a material supply division that they're getting up and running. So when you put all those pieces together, along with some other strategic partnerships that they had going or have going, really made a lot of sense, and couldn't be happier with the team, and the opportunity to be here.
Excellent. You just referenced it, but you and I have been around the industry for quite a long time. And you and I constantly speak about the changes, things that have been happening, obviously with a couple of different things I might want to touch on today. But the first of all is just talk about kind of lending and mortgage servicing overall. You and I have spoken about, the changes that have been going on specifically in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Do you want to share a little bit your thoughts and your perspective about where we stand today?
Yeah, and it's literally, Michael, we've been having these conversations for decades now. What's coming next? Where are we? The interesting thing was, you go back to 2020 and something happened that to us as a global event that nobody could have anticipated, nobody thought would happen, and it did, which was the COVID outbreak. And it completely changed the dynamics of everything in the housing market, as well as other places, but really had a deep impact on the housing market. And things that I thought were going to happen 4 or 5 years ago didn't happen. We thought there could be a housing crash. It didn't crash. It absolutely boomed, particularly in areas like Texas and Florida, Arizona, that absolutely went nuts on the prices. And so we've had this massive pricing escalation that happened for several years. And then the interest rates changed. It kind of slowed everything down. And now we're kind of in that, what I'll call a little bit of a pause. Properties are sitting on the market longer, due to the interest rates, as well as the escalation in prices. And it's really kind of stagnated a lot of areas in general, but there are definitely areas that have been impacted worse than others. If you look at, like, as a specific example, you can look at Palm Springs, California. If you look at Palm Springs proper, the mid-century modern, beautiful homes close to downtown, those have really taken a beating. A lot of investors have lost some money there, and the prices are under a lot of pressure. But go 20 miles out to La Quinta, and it's like nothing ever happened. So, the market's still hot. So it is very area centric as far as, where the real problems are. Same thing could be said about Florida. There are different areas that are much more impacted currently, by the environment that we're in. But I really think that negative story tends to spread, as we saw in the crash back in 07, 08. It starts as a trickle and then it turns into something bigger. And saying that, by no means am I saying we're going to go back into that 07, 08 debacle that we had. But I think we're definitely going to see some price adjustments, some softening in the market, houses on the market longer as this kind of plays out. People are kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for the interest rates to drop, hopefully, which they have a little bit. They're still in the low to mid sixes, which, compared to the 2.5 and 3 that we got very used to, still a big number, but it's getting much more manageable. So it's really just a wait and see from my perspective. I don't want to get into prognosticating where we're going to be because that just hasn't panned out for 5 or 6 years now. It's been really tough to predict where we're going.
Well, then you ruined my next question, but I'm going to prompt you anyways and maybe tee you up a little bit. So you touched on a couple of things that I've been talking about, which would be the drivers right now to where we stand. So 2 things. One is you referenced 2 anomalies, 2 points, reset points in our economy. One was 2007, and the other was the pandemic. But you have a couple of other things going on. Interest rates wildly fluctuating. You have an overabundance or a lack of inventory in the housing market, and you have a lack of appetite right now and a little bit of apprehension in terms of consumerism as it relates to housing. Having said all that, I'm going to ask you a little bit, put you on the spot, I guess, a little bit and say, do you see anything that may be the primary driver, or do you see anything that may be the linchpin to release things a little bit? Not to put you on the spot, but I guess I am.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't put it on one item. I think it's an aggregate. It's the interest rate staying a little bit higher than we're normally used to. When I say normal, not 15 years ago, but 5 years ago, people got really accustomed to that. So that's slowing the market. We have the credit card debt, the auto loan debt are all showing really big signs of distress. You have this month the student loan debt. They have to start making payments again on that. And if you're over 270 days late on those, which I think is going to be a really big number of people, they're going to start just going in and being able to take it right out of your paycheck. So I think it's not one thing that has me nervous or thinks that, could be a big impact. I think it's a bunch of different things. People are stretched out on their credit. The credit is expensive. And again, with the auto and the credit card defaults and the student loans, I think when you take all of them as an aggregate, you're going to see a lot of trouble points. And then you throw on top of that states like Arizona or Texas, California, Florida, where you have the taxes and insurance issues. Texas is getting both of them. Florida is definitely an insurance issue. California is an insurance issue. That's where people are going to start getting hurt, is the escalation. Once those escrow accounts start really hurting, that's going to create some havoc. People are going to be in spots where they're going to have to sell versus wanting to sell. And we haven't really seen that type of environment before at this level. The Florida issue, the South Florida condo market, we're seeing a lot of distress. And there were other things in there as well, with the collapse of the tower that we had a couple years ago and all the inspections and all the work that's being done to those condo units and the expenses of it. It's really changed the dynamic. And again, that's very regional, but that will have an impact on Florida in general, up and down the coast, both coasts for that matter. But so I don't think it's going to be one trigger event that could do it. That being said, it could be one trigger event. Something happens in the stock market that we don't anticipate, or something happens in the Middle East again. There's a lot of variables out there, with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, there's so many things that are out there that are potential issues that we're going to have to face that'll have a big impact on us. But a lot of those would just be guessing if they're really going to come to fruition.
No, that's great. I appreciate it. And you mentioned distress, so it's a natural segue to something else I wanted to talk about, something that's near and dear to our heart because we've been in the industry for so long, talking about mortgage servicing. We've both had multiple hats in the mortgage servicing industry over the years. Can you talk a little bit about, kind of what the things that they've done so well? I've talked about since 2007, CFPB, loss mitigation practices, et cetera, have done some really great things for borrowers. But then there's a lot of people who say maybe that's just prolonging the inevitable. Do you want to share maybe your thoughts?
Well, it's a good time to bring that question up, Michael, because the way that it's operated over the last several years, when I say several years since COVID, there's been a lot of protection for the homeowner built in. So you could get a modification very, very easily. As people are probably pretty aware, loan mod, you go into default, you end up 3, 6, 9 months, whatever it is, delinquent, and they rewrite your loan, bring you current. And they basically had carte blanche on that for the last few years. And that program is going away. They're slowly getting away from those, from the ability to do so many modifications. They're putting more tighter restrictions on the number that you can do and how frequently you can do them. So I think that is going to have a big impact, but it kind of goes back to your, the overall view from the servicing side. That's another variable that is definitely going to have an impact. We see a lot of default. The primary place for defaults is in the FHA portfolios. And that is going to have a trickle effect. You don't see it in the GSEs that much. Their default rates are very low. Their equity situations are great. But saying that, anybody that's bought in the last 3 years, which is a lot of people, they are at the top, what we'll call the top of the market right now, because we've seen it soften. And I think those are going to be the first ones that are going to be susceptible to all the things that we talked about earlier, with the different, the student loan debt and, the credit debt and all those other things that are out there. I think that's the first place we're going to see some failures and some movement.
That's awesome stuff. I feel like we just scratched the surface here, so we're going to have you back. This is a good conversation. It's something, Barry, you and I talk about all the time. Rick, I shared with you, these are the types of things that keep us up at night and we enjoy talking about. So it's great to have Barry on the screen with us.
It absolutely is. Now, Barry, I don't want to let you go without asking this question. I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I've followed your career now for a little while, and I've watched you make some really good decisions about where to go. So you mentioned the team at Black Dome, but what else excited you about that opportunity? What made you make that move?
So one of the great things about Black Dome was it really brought in that property preservation piece of the puzzle for me. That is an area of our industry that, regardless of what's going on in the industry, whether it's a really strong market, a really unhealthy market, preservation is always there. It will go up and down. It's going to fluctuate with the market to some degree. But as an example, I started an eviction management company at the beginning of COVID or during COVID, and thinking, wow, this is really going to explode once all the COVID restrictions are released. It never happened. So I had to transition that company from a mortgage servicing company into really a single family rental space. And having done that, it was really eye-opening to see the opportunities that are going to be out there in the preservation space. And that's, I think, the biggest draw for me personally, was the opportunities that are going to be presented in the mortgage space, in the single family rental space, the multifamily space, you name it. The preservation space is going to be something that's going to just have a lot of opportunities in it. And then when we have the wraparound services like we do, it made really good sense for me to have this as my landing zone.
Mike Harris, he's managing partner at Blackfin, and Barry Owens, Chief Strategy Officer for Blackstone. Guys, thanks again.
My pleasure. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, guys. See you.